Hey there, welcome back to eFishin. I'm Rodney. We've been out here on the river. We're down here on the Salt River today, doing a little white bass fishing. We've been fishing that jig and bobber quite a bit, and we've caught a few fish. We'll show you all that here in a little bit, but one thing I wanted to go over today a little bit more is about the type of flies and jigs that I use. Now, I grew up in East Tennessee and we called a hair jig a fly, so that's what it is. It's just nothing but a little hair jig. It could be a little crappie jig, it could be a floating fly jig, anything like that is a fly to me. So just keep your terminology straight. So we started out using a fly like this right here. That's just a 1/16 ounce craft hair fly. You know, it looks like a little minnow in the water, and that's been real good. We've used white. I've used this blue and chartreuse. I've even caught a few on this pink one down here. So sometimes pink works catching these white bass. But other things that I use under these bobbers, and we'll go over the bobber here in a little bit. Just a little black fly like that, same as those others. And even something small like that, you know, these little Popeye jigs, they can work. And then I've also caught a few with this little jig here. It's just a little crappie shad body thing. They'll eat this thing. And another one is these just little old split tail pieces of plastic, you know, something small on a real small jig head. I don't know if y'all can see that or not. You know, it's like a 64th or 32nd or something like that. Sometimes that works real well. It just all depends. Sometimes they want the, you know, a bigger one, you know, like these, or they want something small like that. You just kind of gotta experiment. And sometimes during the day, don't hesitate if you're fishing a hole and those fish quit biting, is to change it up. You know, change your color, change the size, change the depth of your leader on your bobber. Sometimes just that little bit of change, you'll start them back up, get a few more bites. So anyways, the bobber I like to use is one of these pair bobbers. You know, see right there, it's got a little weight on the bottom of it, and that helps you get a little casting distance on. Now, these white bass, there's no problem with them pulling it down under. They don't do any of that. They don't come up and do like a lift bite, you know, like smallmouth. If you were fishing, sometimes they'll come up. If you're fishing a floating fly, they'll come up and get it from the bottom, come up. And if you don't have a float that's weighted right, it'll lay over. You know, it won't lay over. So if y'all ever fishing a float and it lays over like that, you probably got a fish on. Set the hook, reel them in. So anyways, let's go out there on the river. Let's catch a few, show you one thing to do, and you know, a little bit about it, and let's go get them. Oh, before we go, if y'all pick something up on this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support it, and helps me out a whole bunch. But anyways, let's go to the river and catch a few fish. We're out. So when y'all start fishing in the river for these white bass, keep in mind that they're going to pile up in different places. So just to set this up, there on the far bank, there's some current coming out there, and then where I'm standing, there's a big eddy there, and this current goes all the way back to my right. And those fish seem to be, well, at least this morning, stacked up in that current seam over there. So pay attention to where you get a bite at, and keep fishing similar areas. So again, this fish was over there in the current seam, and it hit just inside the eddy. Now this cast I'm throwing, that current seam is just about where I hit there. So we're going to give that a little try and see if there's any fish out there. And one thing I do when I'm fishing the bank is I just don't fish the same spot. I'll start on the upstream side, and then I'll just continuously do little casts on the way back. And if you notice there, I just had a fish hit that thing, and if you miss one, don't just reel your lure in. Keep working it just the way you were. Sometimes they'll follow that thing for a pretty good way before they finally get it. Here's one more cast. You can see where the current's coming off that point over there. And right there, right between the current and the eddy is where I got that bite. So if you're fishing a hole and the bite slows down, there's different things you can do. You know, you can change your lure, you can change your colors and things like that. But sometimes it's just good to kind of take a walk down the river and see if you can find some similar areas. So here we are, we're going walking up the river here. We're just going to find another little eddy with a current seam in it. So we found this little eddy here. It's created by this tree here. It's down to the left here, and the current's running out in front, and it's creating this little eddy. And there's a few fish stacked in here. How's that, folks? First cast in a new hole. Hasn't been fished to death. Look at that one. There we go. How about that? Think there's another one out there? I bet there is. These fish ain't seen 100 lures. Look at that. There's another one. These are all pretty good fish here in this hole. There's another one. All right, guys. Here's a pro tip about catching these things. If you walk into a hole, talked about this one other time, and they quit biting on you, there's still fish there. They've just come accustomed to your lure. So it's easy just to make a color change and see what happens. So we had a bright color on. We're going to put a black back on and see what that does. Because sometimes and that's one thing about fishing these little plastics jigs, is you can make a color change real quick and see what happens. So here we go. Let's see what goes on right here. And then, oops, something bumped it. And sometimes may have caught all of them. And it's time to move holes. Which is what we're going to do here in a minute. Just saw one flash right there. And then they might be doing their spawning stuff too. And they'll do that sometimes. They'll start spawning. They'll quit eating. And then they'll start eating and quit spawning. So, I don't know. They're fish. They do what they want to do. There we go. See, that didn't take long. Make a color change, catch a fish. So one other thing y'all see me do out here a little bit sometimes is I'll take my float and I'll take it off and I'll just throw my fly out there and I'll let it go down to the bottom and I'll just do a slow, I mean it's kind of painful to do it, but you'll just do a real slow wind back in and you'll catch a few fish sometimes like that. So if I quit pulling the cork down, take your cork off, just throw your fly or your other little piece of plastic and see what you can do. We'll show you one of those here real quick. We're out. So we're back here where we started this morning, back in time. And before I really started fishing with the bobber, you can see I've got it in my hand there. I was just throwing that fly out there, still in this current seam. You can see it coming there where that guy's walking in the water up there. That little shoal there, it's got quite a bit of water coming through it. It runs along that far bank there. And those fish were just kind of stacked in there, so I thought I'd try that, just throwing the fly out there without the bobber, and I picked a couple fish up on it. So I'm basically just throwing that thing over there into that current and letting it go to the bottom, and then I'm just doing this slow wind back. You can see how slow it is. It's not very fast, but those fish sometimes they'll hit it. Make sure y'all hit that subscribe button, especially if y'all pick something up. Thanks for stopping by. We'll catch y'all later. I'm Rodney with eFishin.